Hello, my name is Caroline Fraissinet, and this is our series on career navigation for people with mood disorders. This is the fourth in a six-part series, and I'm recording it after the fact. So you'll see some slides that'll say you're going to be put into a breakout room. Just ignore that. You can pause the camera, to practice with a friend or whatnot, but we'll get going. Today's topic is going to be job interviews. All of this, obviously the normal Zoom stuff doesn't apply here. So our lineup is going to start with addressing pre-interview anxiety, which can be challenging in preparing for your actual interview. Common interview questions and way to approach them. Evaluating whether or not an employer is a good fit for you, because you are interviewing them just as much as they are interviewing you. After interview follow-up tips, as well as anxiety management there. The entire process of interviewing is very anxiety-inducing. So we'll talk about that. And then I'll leave you with some next steps and resources. Again, my name is Caroline. I'm a career advisor. I also live with cyclothymia and OCD. My perspective in this presentation comes from working across multiple industries, being a career advisor, as well as a person who lives with a mood disorder. So to start things off, they already think you're a good fit if you're on the interview stage. I know sometimes I certainly feel, imposter syndrome and sort of feel like, oh, I don't know if they're gonna like me or whatnot while on an interview. Just know they already do. You've already passed the initial phase of reviewing things, and they already think you might be a good fit for the position. So just know that going in, they already are excited to meet you. They already want to know more about you. So they already are thinking that you might be a good fit. So when your negative self-talk kind of tells you that, just remember that fact. A few tips for handling interview anxiety. The first is to find some mindfulness techniques that work for you. There's any number of them. You can work with your mental health care provider or talk to people in support groups or whatnot. But a few ideas are box breathing, focusing on things you can see in the room, all that good stuff. Find something that works for you because, of course, it'll work in this situation as well. Researching the company, so doing your homework in advance can help guide the discussion. So figure out what they do, find out something that interests you about them. Maybe there's something you have a question about. Doing as much research on the place you're interviewing as you can in advance might help to alleviate some of that stress just because you know what you're talking about in advance. Um, on a similar note, find out what interests you about the position or the company. After you research, you can come up with one question you'd like to ask about the company. That'll come back later, as well as one thing that interests you about the company. That way, if you're not quite sure what to say, you can always go back to that question and that thing that interests you. So that can kind of give you a back pocket thing to talk about. And then practice talking to people. If you are socially anxious, ease yourself into it. So that can start with just a conversation with no agenda, just chatting with somebody. It can be a friend, it can be maybe the barista at the coffee shop down the street. Just get used to talking. From there, you can move up to informational interviews, which is more talking about somebody's work. So that's, asking them how they got to the position they're at, as well as any advice they might have. That way, you're kind of talking about work. And then from there, you can move into preparing for an interview and doing mock interviews more specifically. But if you are a socially anxious person, starting with just practicing having a conversation with someone can be a great way to start. And in fact, interviews are nothing more than conversations. Approaching them as a conversation with a person rather than a formal, scary test might be able to help you alleviate some anxiety. And here in the presentation, we just broke up into breakout rooms to just have people talk and try to find something they had in common. So that's something that you can try, with somebody that you don't know. Maybe you chat with them, try and figure out, what's something that you have in common. just to get you used to talking to people. And then from there, once you feel comfortable with that, you can start talking about work-related stuff in a similar context, and then work your way up to a mock interview with a friend, or, if you're in college or you just graduated from college, you can go to your college career center. And I believe there's even AI tools that can help, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So some basics for interview preparation here. Of course, dress professionally. Doing a little bit of research on, maybe on the website, they show pictures of people working there, maybe getting a sense of what level of formality they have in their dress might be a good way to look at it. You can bring copies of your resume. Sometimes you think you're going to go in interviewing with one person and it winds up being a couple. So having a few copies of your resume is helpful. Arrive 10 to 15 minutes early. And similarly, if you have time to practice driving or taking public transportation to the location, that's helpful just so you know generally where you're going. And then you're only worrying about um, traffic or some unexpected thing on your route there because you've already practiced it. Bring something to take notes with. It's always helpful to take notes on stuff. You can bring water. I always bring snacks because I tend to faint easily. So having snacks on hand is always good too. Make sure to use the restroom in advance, and take a deep breath. Use those mindfulness techniques, the box breathing and whatnot to help yourself calm down. But those are some tips, not exhaustive, good as a baseline for preparation once you're getting ready to actually do the interview. We'll move now into common questions and what they generally mean. These are ones that you'll see in most interviews, and a couple of ways to prepare for them. The first one isn't even a question. It is, tell me about yourself. This is usually, I think every single interview I've had has started with this. And basically, they simply want to get to know you and learn why you're interested in the job. So with that said, some approaches. The focus of your response here should be what brought you to this place right now. So tell your story, but keep the focus on how that led you to apply to this specific position. Keep it concise. You don't need to tell your whole life story, but you want to tell enough that it makes sense why you applied for the position, why you're interested, all that good stuff. So sweet spot, usually 60 seconds. Some people call it the elevator pitch. I don't tend to like that phrasing just because I would not be comfortable with somebody telling me their whole, pitch about why they should be considered for a position at a company while I'm in the elevator. But it's 60 minutes, kind of a brief overview. And the nice thing about that is you can prepare in advance. Um, and yes, you can plot it out. Since this is such a common one, you can sort of write down and practice what you want to say here. In previous presentations, I discussed the Pixar story spine, and this is a way to sort of help you figure out your 60-second brief introduction. If you are interested in receiving that, there are resources that I did provide as part of the live group. Feel free to reach out to DBSA California and we can hook you up with that, as that is one of the things that's included in there. And of course, just practice. You can practice in front of the mirror. You can practice with a friend. Just trust somebody you trust, or just simply the mirror. This one is one you can definitely prepare in advance. So just take the time to sort of figure out what you want to say, and then make sure you practiced it. Job transitions, a common one for, I would say, most of the population, but particularly for people with mood disorders. If you're switching industries entirely, people might be curious as to why you're looking for a different position from the one that you may have worked in the past. So expressing again why you're looking to transition industries or why this job interests you is really helpful here to get the employers to understand your logic a bit more. So some approaches, again, make it part of your story. So you can kind of do some of the legwork for this in your self introduction with the tell me about yourself. So you might be able to sort of tease that out. I was doing this for a certain amount of time, then I found I wanted to do this instead. So that led me to look into companies and I'm interested in yours. So you can put that in that sentence to sort of tee it off, or possibly preempt the question in the first place. Focus on your transferable skills. Virtually every job has certain skills that you can apply to anything. Pick one or two and talk about how you can apply that to your new job. A good way to figure out some things to talk about here are to go back to the job description for the position that you're interviewing for. Usually, they'll give you a hint on some of these transferable skills. So, they'll want somebody who's very organized. Talk about how you have organization skills you've developed from your previous job or your previous industry. Critical thinking you have to use in every job. So finding one or two that they specifically mentioned in the job description they wanted, apply that to, how you figured out you wanted to work in this industry, you wanted to change it up. Show your passion. Express why you're enthusiastic about making the switch. For example, if you're switching from a for-profit company to a nonprofit, talk about why you're interested in a nonprofit versus the for-profit company. And a main concern why this sometimes comes up, and this is certainly came up when I was interviewing for different positions, is they're sometimes concerned that you'll want to go back to your previous position or you're only applying to it as like a stopgap. So make it clear that this is something that you want and it's a conscious decision. So make it clear why you're wanting to change and what excites you about working in this new environment, working in this new industry, working in this new job type. Making it clear, this is what I want, will help to explain that to employers. Career gaps are another one that comes out quite often. This is kind of similar to the job transitions. They're curious about what brought you to them now. This one can be scary, but I think there's ways to get around it, or not really even get around it. Make it part of your story to make you a more appealing candidate as well. So, first off, you only need to share what you're comfortable sharing. There are limited questions, at least in the United States, about what employers can ask, and especially so if it's related to health. So evaluate what you would be comfortable sharing and stick to that. You can talk about what you learned from those opportunities too, or life circumstances. Framing the gap as having taught you something valuable can help. For example, I had to take time off due to an illness, but that really taught me adaptability. I had to be very organized in terms of making sure I got to appointments and took notes to sort of inform the doctor. So that helped me sort of realize this is what I want in a career. I built those skills and I want to be able to use them to do XYZ. Again, bringing it back to why now. The ultimate goal of each question should be to answer this clearly. So why did you take the gap? Oh, well, this is why, but now I'm really interested in this, and that's why I applied to this job right now. So making it specific and positive in that way is really helpful. And express you're eager to work. Sometimes employers ask this because they're, oh, are they going to need to take another break or are they ready to come back to work? Make it clear that you are ready and you're excited and able to work. So again, framing it positively, I took a break. This was why I learned this. I'm ready to, apply that. This position sounds like a good fit. Sort of framing it that way helps to, answer the questions as well as reinforce that you're a good fit for the position right now. Any question that starts with, tell me about a time when. These types of questions actually have a name. They're called behavioral questions. And the nice thing is there's a beautiful formula that works for answering these pretty well. It's called the STAR method, and it's broken down into 4 steps. So it starts with the situation. You're going to give the employer enough context to sort of understand what was going on in this scenario. So, for example, I had a group project for a class. The task you had to do in that circumstance. So we had to create a group presentation, but we were only given a week. So that was challenging to sort of figure out what we were going to do with that short amount of time. Action. So what did you do in the circumstance? In this case, I took the lead in delegating tasks and everyone did a few slides of the deck. And then the results, what happened as a result of those actions. So everybody did their part, we gave the presentation, and we got an A. So you can always use this formula to kind of think through a few examples in advance. So think through if there's sort of things that you know might come up, like tell me about a time you faced a challenge, or tell me about a time that you worked on a team or something like that. Think of a few scenarios that you can use for those types of questions, and you can practice them using the STAR method. Um, so that's a good way to approach that. And then finally, almost every interview is going to end with, do you have any questions for us? I do recommend asking a question, and there's a couple of guidelines that you can go through here. So, remember when you made a back pocket one when you were researching the company? If that wasn't directly answered, this is a great time to break that out. So, that'll especially show like, hey, I did my research. This is a question I had based on that. So that's always a good one to come back to if it hasn't already been answered. Sometimes a question might come up naturally. So, after talking to the person, is there anything that you are curious about based on talking to them? That's a good time to ask as well. If you can't think of one, I still recommend asking one. If you can't think of one, asking them what type of personality does well there. That's kind of one of my back pocket ones, as well as what they like most about their job is always a good one and can yield some useful information, which we'll get into a little bit more later. And then the final question to ask is asking about the timeline. So, what are the next steps in the interview process? When should I expect to hear an answer? All that good stuff. That can definitely help alleviate post-interview anxiety, and that's one they're always anticipating when they're interviewing for a position. So, by asking that, they might tell you, well, we have the rest of the week, we're going to be doing interviews, then we're going to make a decision. We should get back to you by the end of next week. That way, you also know when you can follow up with them. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, too. In our live presentation, we had practice to test out, getting comfortable answering these types of questions. As you've seen in the presentation, there's many you can kind of work with. The ones that we had were the simple "tell me about yourself," as well as "tell me about a time that you faced a challenge and overcame it." Those are pretty common ones that come up in interviews, but you can also Google. I also believe I put a list of questions in that you can practice with. So if you would like that resource packet, make sure to reach out to DBSA California and we can hook you up with that. I also want to flip the script a little bit. Interviews go both ways. So while making a good impression on them is important, it's just as important that they make a good impression on you. That's important as well. And even if a position seems fine, there might just be something that doesn't work for you about it, and that's totally fine. It's I think so much emphasis is placed on you have to make a good impression, but they do as well, and you're a valuable person in the workplace, and that's something to consider here. So, above all, I recommend trusting your instincts. If something doesn't feel right about the opportunity, don't dismiss those feelings. We'll talk about ways to address some concerns and look out for some red flags. But if you take away nothing from this presentation, just remember that your feelings are valid. And you'll know when it's a good fit for you, as well as just going through the process. The easiest way to learn is simply to ask. So, if there's something that concerns you about the position, the interview is the perfect time to ask. So, for example, oh, I noticed, there's a lot of work that gets done within a calendar year. How does the company factor in work-life balance? How many hours per week do you work? All that kind of stuff. It's a good time to ask that. If you have any concerns right off the bat, and you want to learn a little bit more about it, framing it as, I was curious about blah, blah, blah. That's a good way to sort of find out information in a way that seems curious rather than, well, this isn't going to work for me because X, Y, and Z. So asking simply is the easiest way to get about it. But what if something still feels off? It's like they answered your questions. There's nothing specific, but you're just not feeling it. Your feelings and instincts are valid. If it doesn't feel right, definitely listen to that. I did come across a few red flags, fairly common red flags. These are sort of things that I came up against when I was interviewing for positions, and what I've noticed with other people that I've advised, that I would like to bring to your attention. Some common employer red flags. One is you simply don't like the person. If you just like, there's something about the other person, maybe they didn't necessarily do anything, but you're just not vibing. Listen to that instinct. Gut feelings are valid. And you want to make sure it's an environment you feel comfortable in. So, if you just aren't a great personality match or like energy match with the other person, that's valid. So, check in with, could I see myself actually working with this person in a productive way? This one I don't see as much anymore, but I do like to bring it up. You need to have a thick skin. I noticed this a lot in the entertainment industry a while back, but this often is an excuse for poor behavior. So, this could suggest that there's a lack of accountability, where it's putting it back on you if something hurts your feelings or something, or you're talking about something. So, I would, you know, watch out for that if somebody says that in an interview. Um, we work really, really long hours. Now, this isn't a deal breaker. Some places, just by the nature of the job, you're going to work really, really long hours. Certainly working at a hospital, people generally work 12-hour shifts. So it's not an outright deal breaker. It's just something to consider based on the fact that people with mood disorders tend to have more sensitive circadian rhythms. So that's just something to keep in mind. If there's a particular format to the way they work or a certain like non-conventional hours type situation, that's something to consider as well. Um, and then if they can't answer your questions, this could suggest poor communication and organizational skills. It could suggest that they don't quite know what they're going to do with this position yet. So, if you say, well, what are my day-to-day responsibilities? And they can't give you an answer on that, that can set you up to fail. So, being conscious of how they communicate can be helpful when you're evaluating in the interview whether they're a good fit for you. It's also important to check in with yourself after the interview. Check in with yourself, make sure that you're getting a good sense of what the company is like and whether you could see yourself there. Obviously, you're not going to know 100%, but you should be able to sort of see, yes, I'm interested in this opportunity, or it seemed fine. Everybody was nice and everything, but I don't know that this is the job that I necessarily want to do for XYZ reason. So checking in with yourself is really important too. A few questions to ask yourself. Did the job or position interest you? Do you think you would enjoy doing this type of work? The people. Did you like the person or people you interviewed with? Did they seem happy to be there or did they seem miserable? And that's where the question, what's your favorite thing about working at this place can be useful. So, if the person responds with, oh, I love working with this team and, we get to do really interesting projects, all that good stuff. Okay, it seems like they might like working there. But if they're like, oh, I there's a good Chinese place around the corner. Like, I guess that's it. That's probably a sign that they're not too happy at their job. And maybe there's some things about the position that isn't ideal. Environment. Do you feel comfortable in the physical space? Was there enough or too much light? How about the sound in the space? People with mood disorders tend to be a little bit more sensitive to light and sound. So those are important considerations for you too in staying well. And the company. Does the company's mission and vision resonate with you? And do they offer benefits that can help you to stay well? We'll talk about that a little bit more in our next presentation too, specifically about offer negotiation and evaluating benefits. The next step is to thank your interviewers. Sending an email thanking your interviewers within 48 hours shows interest and professionalism. I do see a lot of suggestions for handwritten notes. I think they are lovely, but sometimes they take too long to get there. I remember one time I received a thank you note from an interviewee. And it got to me literally a year after we had made a decision on the position, just because I work at a large organization and it can take a really long time to get through the entire mail processing system. So just realize like a handwritten note is great. You can certainly do that in addition to writing the email, but the timing can sometimes be off. So an email just kind of covers your bases there. And now we wait. This is, in my opinion, the most annoying part of the interview process. Here's some tips to stay well while you're waiting to hear back. Usually, the employer will give you a sense of when they'll be moving on to the next part of the hiring process. So that's something that they'll tell you when you ask that timeline. And they might even give you a day to expect the update. So they said, by the 20th, we will make our decisions and move on to the next phase. So if you know it's the 20th, you can follow up with them on the 20th. If they don't give you a specific time, a week after you've done the interview is always fair too. And then from there, you can kind of follow up. They'll kind of give you a sense of how to follow up after that. They'll say either, oh, you know what, we'll know later today. I'll get back to you, or we still haven't heard back quite yet, so I'll update you, but I'm guessing not until the end of the week we'll have an update or something like that. So that'll help you get a timeline so that you're not just completely in the dark about, am I gonna hear back? What happened kind of situation. Couple of tips to stay calm while you're waiting to hear back on an interview. Of course, not exhaustive, but a good place to start. Not hearing back right away does not mean you did not get the job. This is something that took me a really long time to realize. I'd be like, well, that I must not have gotten it if I haven't heard back in a week and a half. One of the positions that I had, actually the position before my current one, it took them 3 months to get back to me on an interview. So, most of the time, and speaking on the end of I've hired people, most of the time, if you don't hear back by the time frame they mentioned, it's usually because something else came up that took the person's attention to do something else and everything. It's usually nothing to do with you. In fact, it's never anything to do with you. So just realize, if it's taking a little bit longer, that does not mean at all that you have not, that you didn't get the job. Don't obsessively check your email for responses. This is a hard one for me having OCD, but I think it's worth mentioning because anxiety is very common when you're factoring in a mood disorder and whatnot. So don't obsessively check your email. Make sure you're taking breaks. Stay focused on your personal wellness activities. Make sure you're setting goals other than stuff related to careers to stay balanced. So you did all the work you're going to do for career stuff after you've done the interview for the day. What are some other things you want to do? Maybe you want to make sure that you're exercising 3 times a week. Okay, well, we can focus on that now. Maybe now's the time to get one of those 3 sessions in or something like that. So make sure you've got other things going on and other goals for your time while you're waiting. And keep applying to other jobs until you get a solid offer, which we'll talk about next time. And keep an open mind about things. So just to know, nothing's set in stone, which is annoying, but it's also freeing at the same time. So just remember, you're not just focused on the one position. You've got other things to keep your attention on before you hear back. In conclusion, seeing interviews as a way to see if a job is a good fit for you is a good way to approach it. You are offering something valuable to employers. Making sure that you're a good fit for each other will make for the best working relationship. So with that said, I have a few resources. If you are interested in receiving the worksheets and the packet of all of that information, feel free to reach out to DBSA California and we can hook you up with that. Um, this is the recording, but all the other sessions are recorded as well. So you can reach out to DBSA California, or I believe we put all of the links for all of the previous recordings in the email announcements too. So you should be able to access them that way too. If you are in college or have graduated from a college, check out the Career Center. A lot of times you can find resources about interviewing prep. You can schedule mock interviews as a student or an alum. So you can work with somebody directly who's very well versed in career stuff. The Pixar Story Spine is in that worksheet packet. So that's a good way to practice the tell me about yourself question. AI can help with mock interviews too. There are many resources. So just Google free mock interview with AI and you'll come up with a bunch of different resources there. And I also included a list of common interview questions and ideas for questions for you to ask in the worksheets as well. References. Thank you so much for your time. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to DBSA California and they can put me in touch with you. I hope you are able to join us at our next workshop. The next one is scheduled for the 21st at 5:30, and then there'll be one more after that one. So the next topic is all about offer negotiation. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.